Welcome everybody to another issue of the Digital Series. It's actually our first one in 2022. Also, our second live edition of European Rotors is less than 2 months away from now. Wow, can't wait to meet you all in person in Cologne from the 8th to the 10th November. Our ambition is to bring everybody together in the VTOL scene, of course, from Europe, but we are looking also into new prospects and new partners. And for the first time, I'm having the pleasure to speak someone from India, and they have an interesting project. And as always, please let's welcome my guest first. Hi, Professor Satya. Good morning. How are you doing? May you shortly introduce yourself?
Right. I'm Satya Chakravarthy. Thanks for having me here, Frank. I'm fundamentally a professor of aerospace engineering at IIT Madras in Chennai, but in the last 2-3 years, I have been into entrepreneurship, running the ePlane company, which is expecting to make the first two-seater eVTOL aircraft for air taxi service in India and abroad.
Thank you so much for that short introduction. Again, you are our first Indian partner, our first Indian company to be at European Rotors as a virtual exhibitor and also as a speaking partner. You are going into the next generation of urban transports. Can you talk a little bit about ePlane, the company, and your project behind?
Right. So I think it's about time people actually started taking electric aviation very seriously. That's the starting point for me to foray into what we are trying to do here. It's just that I think if you have to think about electric planes, you have to concede that given the current battery technologies that we are working with, we will not be in a position to go very far with the batteries that we have for conventional takeoff and landing planes. So we need to certainly look at markets that are taking people from within a city to across different points in a city. And that means that we need to have a vertical takeoff and landing. So the way this is actually getting deduced is in a very progressive, logical manner that you do not have a choice other than making electric VTOLs, and which is exactly what we went through at IIT Madras, and let's actually do a very compact electric VTOL that can take off and land from very tight urban spaces. So the E200 that we are looking at is something that is fairly compact, winged, and therefore it has a fairly long range. But at the same time, we have a way by which we can bring the vertical rotors to operate and decrease the forward speed, and that's an IP that we have on how we position it. So that the wings are very effective. And this slow speed and long range essentially means that we can do multiple short hops in a single charge. That's what we are actually hoping to do.
Many thanks for that short introduction, and the description of the product sounds very interesting. Also here in Europe, the market and the demand for electrical driven e-vehicles, especially for urban use, as you're already mentioning, is increasing, and there are many concepts developing. How is the situation in India in total around the VTOL market, its different uses, and what makes the E200, I mean, you named already some design principles, so special?
Correct. So one thing that might surprise a lot of people is in June of 2021, McKinsey brought out a report that looked at about 6 different countries and did a survey of about 4,000 plus respondents. And these countries are India, China, Brazil, Germany, US, and Poland. And then the choice of countries is very interesting in including several emerging economies as well as the advanced economies. What we found was that 2 things. One is they did a survey on multiple different travel that could happen within a city or around a city with customers. And this included commutes, airport travel, leisure travel, short distance, leisure travel, long distance, and shopping, and a few other things. And across all of these different travel options, Indians were the ones who were about 40 to 50% of them who said that they will choose a urban aerial mobility option when compared to less than about 10 to 15% from Germany and the US, which essentially means that it is the emerging economies that are actually ready for a new technology, whereas the advanced economies are saturated with existing technologies that does not really appetize them for more newer technologies. The second important point was the question was, how much would you be able to spend more than your current mobility costs. And Indians were the top and saying anywhere between 3.5 to 5 times their existing mobility costs, whereas the corresponding answers from Germans and Americans was not much more. So I think Germans and Americans, particularly in this context, are actually doing a fairly good job of their mobility options at the moment, whereas the pain point in beating traffic is actually in the emerging economies. Is the point to note. So our target is essentially to start with India as a starting point, but expand to specific economies that will appreciate the need for very compact, slow-flying, long-range aircraft that we are trying to build. And we will, of course, be interested in the advanced economies because there is a slice of going to downtown kind of traffic that will still be required, and we can think of capturing that markets, over time.
Thank you so much. It's really great to hear that Indians are willing to pay more into their mobility. We had actually here researches going on about the acceptance of potential eVTOL projects for cities. Yes, of course, one of the biggest advantages will be that they are less noisy and they are more greener. However, helicopters can also more green if you have the right fuels, if we work on leveling the noise. But there was one point people were extremely concerned here in Europe. It's about whether birds gonna be harmed by eVTOLs flying into cities. So there are a lot of aspects we have to tackle. Thanks for all these interesting analysis. So now let us look into a little bit about the next steps for you. As always, I mean, a project, a nice idea, a philosophy, a great teams of engineers is the starting point, as you're saying it. But now, what are the milestones in terms of development, certification, and then, of course, enter into service?
Right. So right now we are actually working on putting together a subscale eVTOL, which is about a 3-meter wingspan, and capable of carrying 50 kilograms payload. And this is something that we are focusing on so that we can get it up and running by end of October, if we can, this year. Simultaneously, we have initiated the certification process in India for the 2-seater eVTOL that we're talking about, the E200 itself, with a possibly an aggressive timeline of doing this in about 2 to 3 years, which is quite typical if the certifying agency is focused on doing this alone. And that's one of those advantages we might be able to get out of India. But the point essentially is to adopt international certification standards so that we will be in a position to utilize the certification process that we go through in India for similar such certification abroad as well. So the timeline here is to be able to go to market in the next 3 years, 2 to 3 years. Like that's around 2025, I would think. Yeah.
Ambitious goals, keeping fingers crossed that that's going to work out well. I mean, India has proven over the last, I would say, decades that you are one of the fastest evolving countries in all dimensions, including, of course, the high-tech development. So personally, I have no doubt that you are really capable to meet your ambitious goals. But again, starting where we're beginning. We are really honored to have you on board to learn from you what you're gonna plan, to listen a little bit to the Indian market. I'm sure the visitors will be fascinated about your project and will get into contact with you. Potentially, you'll find some suppliers who may also help you over your project. And of course, the question, as always, why have you chosen European Rotors to be for the first time on display with us?
Yeah, I think we are very excited about being part of European Rotors, mainly because it is a very technically competitive, competent forum that we saw among a lot of these kinds of events that are being organized around, let's say, air taxis and eVTOLs. We are looking forward to getting a lot of partnerships on getting key components for the eVTOL on the one hand, and also position ourselves as you rightly pointed out, basically an Indian company with global aspirations, if you will. Right. So which essentially means that we want to be positioning ourselves in the world outside India, and not just be seen as an Indian company for India alone, but also to serve the rest of the world.
Thank you so much about that. we promise to do our best to meet your expectations, but I think EHA, as the European Helicopter Association, and EASA, they stand for that. Means you're gonna meet the regulator who you have to get in touch with anyhow for certification then in Europe. You're gonna meet the right suppliers because, as you say, we're not only looking into the classical or the normal VTOL business, but of course into new concepts. And we have always the chart, means we have the industry, including the suppliers, plus the operators and the regulators. So
Indeed.
it was a pleasure to have this short appetizer for our show and for your presentation at the show today. You can already then get in contact with ePlane of our virtual event page, which is already up and running. And then I can't wait to meet you in person from the 8th to the 10th of November in Cologne. Dear Professor Satya, it was a pleasure. Safe travels and see you in November in Cologne. Thank you for that. Bye-bye.
Yeah, indeed.
Thank you.